Drop the butt.
Hey, you open the gate. That's all I gotta say.
Gives you an inch.
He said, don't let me forget.
Okay. So I am spending what seems like a considerable amount of time on this, but again, I think I'm really stressing it because some other classes, I glossed over this, like, oh, and then they didn't get it. And then once you don't get this, you don't get it. And so what happens is you're going to have to go out, and especially the Stromberg carburetor that doesn't have a mixture that works at idle, you have to find best power at idle. And what happens is I get students will go out there and they have no idea how any of this works. Just the best power thing just went right over their head, and it's well, I guess I'll figure it out when I get there. So I've only got one ground power unit, and everybody's going to be waiting in line. And then I get a group that goes out there for 2 full lab periods for something that should somebody like the Marvel Schebler, somebody knows what they're doing. Start it, warm it, set it. You're done in 15 minutes, and that's like taking your time. Stromberg, it's a little bit longer, but still not much more than 15 minutes is enough. And they'll take 2 lab periods. Why? Because you don't know what they're doing. So they will just screw knobs and push buttons and come and get me nonstop. Is this what you wanted? God, I hope so, because we don't know. And if it just, it's like you can't do that. And so, by the way, I will put a stop to it. If you're out there for more than an hour, I will just come and say, you're done. Take your carburetor off, put your name at the bottom of the list, and when everybody else has gone through, you can have another shot at it. Because it just isn't fair to the rest of the class. People get real angry. They're like, hey, we were waiting for this thing. They've been on it for 2 hours. So, you don't do that. So that's why I'm spending a lot of time. I want you to understand, how do you find best power? Because again, how do you, the Stromberg, what we'll talk about a little bit, it doesn't have a mixture that works. The Marvel Schebler has a mixture. So, in most carbureted airplanes, how do you tell? You're supposed to run how much at idle? What did I say?
650.
Not the RPM, but rich or lean?
Lean.
Rich. About how rich?
All the way.
About 50 RPM rich at best power.
Yeah.
So the red knob's all the way in, but the mixture is set about, we'll say 50 RPM above best power. So you get so when you reach over and grab the red knob and pull it all the way out to kill the engine, what do you see? You see the RPM go up about 50 and then it dies. The end dies part's really important, because if you come to the oil table and I say, what happens when you pull the red knob out? It runs right. Well, it goes up 50 RPM.
Next.
What I believe you just said is, when you pull the red knob all the way out, it goes from 600 to 650, it just runs. Okay, that's not true. You get a momentary, it's just really fast. 650 down. Oh, okay. If it's just right before it dies, you'll see it. Sometimes you hear it faster than you can see it. Got it? Okay, but you got to find that. With the Marvel Schebler, it's easy. You pull the red knob out, it shuts off the fuel, it does that, it dies. On the Stromberg, you can pull the red knob out, and you'll wait until the fuel tank runs out of gas, because it ain't going to shut it down. And that's an oral question, why? Right? So the only way to really do it here in class would be to adjust the mixture until you see a little rise in RPM and then start to go the other way. Nope, go back until you get peak power, and then unscrew it until it goes a little bit 50 RPM down. So if you were to cut off the fuel, it would go up and down. Got it? You have to do that. All right. I had some stuff about leading in flight. Some of it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to write it all down, but I will do this. Why? Let's put this. Why? Why do we lean in flight?
Better fuel.
Better fuel.
What would be the number one reason?
Lower CHD.
Restore best power. Well, it doesn't make any sense if I want to climb to 12,000 feet in my airplane and I take off here at full throttle, full rich, and by the time I get to 8,000 feet, the engine is just barely producing any horsepower because it's so overly rich. So I'm like, wow, I wish I had a better engine. Now, you want a better engine? Why don't you try pulling the red knob out just a little tiny bit? Pull it back out. Go, whoa, look at all that power. Dang, where'd that come from? All right, it was free all along. It's better than free. It's actually spending money to not get it. What else? Store best power.
Cylinder head.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to put cool CHT because if you left it full rich, it's going to run really cool.
Very cool.
So,
Can control mixture with altitude. Better economy.
okay, better economy. Better economy. What else we got? I wrote down smooth engine, but honestly, engines run really smooth in the rich range. They don't really talk to you. They're just, hey, run it full rich. So I'm not going to put smooth running.
All your performance charts are based on it being lean.
That's
So
true.
You can't really keep track how much fuel you burn unless you do that.
Okay, keep track. Fuel burn. Well, wait a minute. Doesn't the aircraft just have fuel gauges? You know what's the most inaccurate thing in any aircraft I've ever seen, unless you've got size gauges, which are huh? Fuel gauges. You know,
Most accurate is 0.
yeah.
Even then.
Even then, it's questionable. No, you talk to any pilot I've ever seen. There's your fuel gauge. You know exactly how much fuel you have on board. You time it, so it's based on that. Now, a lot of aircraft now have an actual flow meter that actually measures the fuel going into the carburetor and getting burned. So you can keep track of that. Okay, keep track. And we can say 1, 2, 3, 4. Reduce lead contamination. Cleaner running engine. All that. So there's some benefits right there. Let's see. Leaning must be done appropriately to prevent high CHT. We already looked at that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're not careful, we're gonna go to peak, but we don't like peak. We're just gonna enrich it about 50 degrees and cool things down. Right? Does that work? No, you should say no. Let me see. Leaning in flight. Let me see. I'll just put the highlights here. Talk about CHT. What else we got? Detonation. Do have to be considered of detonation. So when are we going to get detonation?
Too lean at the start.
Too low.
Let's see. This is just more of the same here. This is Lycoming's. Best power. I don't think we want to talk about that one. Boy, I really got in the weeds.
Wait, can you go back to the other one,
No.
please?
Which one?
Behind. That
That one? I think I'll talk about that in a little bit. Let me see. I don't know. You want to talk about that one? Let me see. Things I didn't talk about. Lycoming. This is just this chart enlarged over here, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Looks like it.
Okay, so specific fuel consumption down here. We've got percent power here. Best power right here. Best power happens to be about there, which is what? So we have EGT temps. This is peak. They just did different. Minus 100, minus 200. So best power is right about, I'm sorry.
-180?
Best power. I forget what I did. Max power. Oh, there's a red line here. This red line here is 50 degrees. There we go. It's 50 degrees. Because it's half 100 right there. 50 degrees, 100 degrees. So our best power is, it's right there.
Yeah, no, 150.
About 150. 150 what? Rich a peak, lean a peak. Rich a peak. Give us best power. About 100 degrees rich a peak, 150 degrees rich a peak. Follow that?
Yeah.
And our best economy is going to be over here, which is exhaust gas temp, which is going to be about 50 degrees lean a peak. So that's all I was doing there. It's just a Lycoming version, the same thing we looked at. So you chart the best power mixtures for different power settings. This chart just represents the fact that that's not the same for all power settings. So for this particular engine that's rated up to 550 horsepower, so between 450 and 550 horsepower, best power is right here on this power curve, which is at 1. Is that 10 to 1? And then for here, best power for 375 to 475 horsepower at a different RPM setting, because things are different. The hell? I forget. Let's see. Best power. Is it pointing? That's the line. It's roughly the same. Oh, fuel air ratio. There we go. Okay. Correction factor, horsepower. Okay, just don't worry about that. So right here. So best power here at 3150 RPM, 3150 RPM, which by the way gives you 450 to 500 horsepower. It's going to come down here. We have a ratio of 0.92 or something like that. Okay. This one has to be a ratio of 0.8 something. And this one has to be a ratio over here. So it's just showing you and explain to you that your mixture ratio, your 15 to 1, your 10 to 1, your 12 to 1, okay, it's different for the same engine. It's not the same across the board. It's going to depend upon your RPM. Follow?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I said, oh, my engine, it runs best at 12 to 1. Fuel. That would be your next question. Where? Oh, from idle all the way up. You'd say, liar. Yeah. No, that's not true. So, okay, so it's going to depend upon the engine. And let me see, effects power consumption. Let me see, percent relative horsepower. I don't remember what I did with all these charts. That's why I said I can really get into the weeds on some of this. So let's just not. That's really all that stuff we already looked at. Was headed to this one because this has this red fin area right here represents the danger zone. It's actually a danger zone based upon cylinder head temp. But there's a correlation between cylinder head temp and detonation. So even though this is based on cylinder head temp, you can also say the red is a danger zone for detonation. And so if you listen to a lot of people that talk about the red fin, and so ideally what happens here, here's our peak EGT, see that? Yeah. We start with a climb. So our climb, we're going to be very rich of peak, very rich, right? And so you can lean it as you go, because the higher you get, here's our percent horsepower. I don't know why we're at 80 here, but 80%, 85, 80, 75, 70, 65. So when you are, let's say here at 80% power, you have a pretty big danger zone. 85, it's going to be worse at 100. You have a big danger zone in here, right? But by the time you get down here to 65%, you have very little danger. And if you get all the way to 60%, there's not much you can do to damage the engine. And so when you bring the power all the way back, either because you reduce the power or you've gone so high that your max horsepower is 60, you can do whatever you want. Right? You can't lean it enough to get your cylinder head temps too high or detonate. Yeah, width of the red box varies dramatically with power. 3 most useful outside the red zones for climb and cruise. All right, so I feel like I'm just kind of getting out there on this one. Leaning in flight. Okay, we had to be worried about detonation. We talked about the danger zone. This is just fun facts, I guess. What's not a fun fact? Let's see. Maybe I'll write it if I think about it. See, many old POHs instruct pilots to lean to 50 degrees rich of peak. Where's that going to put us? There's a song about it. Highway to the danger zone. Hear it? Top Gun. That's what they're talking about. Flying around in a Cessna 172, excessively leaning. Let's see. How to lean is controversial. Okay, we can leave that. It's a fact that, well, let's see. How to lean was quite controversial. Some believe only rich at peak operation. Fuel is cheaper than the engine, so use extra fuel to ensure adequate margin of cooling and anti-detonation. Some people buy into that. And I'm not saying they're wrong, because they are right. You dump more fuel in, we've already looked at the graphs, your CHTs are going to go down. Your EGTs are going to go down. And some people say, you look at those two things going down, how could it be bad? The only downside is what?
More fuel.
Fuel consumption.
Well, if you have the money for fuel, then the only downside is what? Lead.
Yes.
So if we had an unleaded engine and didn't mind burning extra gas, then don't worry about it. Some believe lean of peak is best. Fuel has a lot of lead, and that lead is bad for the engine. Extra fuel causes deposits on the valves. Okay, but we go lean, and as long as the engine's running somewhat smooth, what happens to CHT? What happens to EGT? Cool is cool.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if you're on rich side or lean side. Cool is cool. That's what I think. Okay. But that is not what the engine manufacturers say. So let's see. Extra fuel is needed at higher power settings for cooling and anti-detonation. True or false? Absolutely true. Extra fuel is needed at higher power settings for cooling and anti-detonation. That is a fact. Extra fuel. Extra fuel is, well, I want to make sure that you understand this because we talk about lean to peak, rich to peak, cool is cool, but no, extra fuel is needed at higher power settings for cooling and anti-detonation. Carburetors are sometimes, some of them are pre-programmed, if you will, and I'll show you how, to add extra fuel when the throttle is wide open. Or they find a way to reduce the fuel when the throttle is midway. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Fun fact, leaning a Cessna 150. I quote the POH. Pull the mixture control out until the engine RPM peaks. Engine RPM peaks. What does that sound like? Best power. So we don't have an EGT gauge in this airplane. Pull the mixture out until we get peak RPM, peak power. And then it begins to fall off. So what do they tell us? Yep, till it peaks and begins to fall off. Okay? Then enriching slightly back to peak RPM. So we're going to run that Cessna 150 where? Best power? Go back to the chart I like. We're going to run that. Remember, this isn't a 150. We're going to run it at best power. Okay? Mm-hmm. Sure. And you don't have to worry about CHTs in a Cessna 150. Why? Because there isn't a gauge. Just run it. Don't have to worry about it. All right. Leaning a Cessna 182. Okay, this is the TCM 0470 carbureted. At 75% horsepower. So where can you start leaning it?
75% horsepower.
So they don't want you to lean it.
75%.
Okay. At 75% horsepower, lean to peak EGT, because this had a single probe EGT. Lean to peak EGT, and then enriching by 50 RPM. It's right out of the book.
This is at idle,
50
right?
degrees, right?
No.
No, this is in flight.
Why would you lean at idle? Okay, that's a good question. Okay, you don't ever watch your EGT gauges at idle. They don't work. They're meaningless.
It's not high.
So, yeah, we're talking about leaning in flight. Operation at peak EG, this is still the Cessna. Operation at peak EGT is only authorized at 65% power or less. So they're saying, you best be running here. You're only authorized to go here at 65% power or less. I think there's one more thing in here. Operation on the lean side of peak EGT is not authorized. Watch me. What about our Lycomings? Service instruction 1094 Delta for normally aspirated engine. You have a fuel injected, huh? Yeah. Best power mixture, lean until tack, fixed pitch, or airspeed indicator, constant speed, peaks. And then you'll be about 100 degrees rich at peak. So they go best power, and then they say you'll be about 100 degrees rich at peak. If you want best economy, lean until engine runs rough, increase until it's smooth. You'll be at
Best power.
peak EGT.
Yeah.
So lean until it starts to run rough, push it in until it starts to run smooth. Why is it running rough over here?
Not enough power.
Hmm?
Fuel.
Yeah, not enough
The
fuel.
mixture's off. It's too easy.
Yeah, it's you start to get an uneven mixture, and you get a. So some people say that what happens in a carbureted engine, when any engine, when but it's mostly carbureted, like my engine, when you pull it back until it gets rough, that they say you're starting to get a lean misfire. And other people say that's not true at all, because you're so far away from the 18-to-1 that it's running. It's just what you get is an uneven distribution, and so these cylinders have more power than these cylinders, and so you start to feel it in your butt.
It's like our,
Huh?
like our engine on the stand.
Yeah.
Two cylinders.
Yes, very much. All right, so best economy mixture, lean until it gets rough, push it in until it gets smooth. You'll be right about peak EGT. My airplane is very much that way. I can go to peak EGT so fast. Just pull it right out until it starts to get rough, push it in until it's not, look over. I'm at 1410 and 1430 EGT. I just that fast, almost guaranteed. So it does work. Byproduct of combustion is. All right, we got all that? I'm kind of moving on. So byproduct. Combustion is what?
Lead deposits.
No, you're right, but
Carbon.
Carbon monoxide.
Heat.
Uh-huh.
carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide will kill you. When I drove ambulance a long time ago, I was fortunate enough that I took some unfortunate person to, at that time it was Mercy San Juan, to the hyperbaric chambers. Now, if you've ever seen an MRI, anybody have an MRI?
Yeah.
Do you get a little claustrophobic in there? Okay. Well, if you're even slightly claustrophobic, MRI was originally designed to diagnose claustrophobia. So,
It'll do it to you if you have it.
okay,
Yeah.
that is like an open ballroom compared to hyperbaric chamber.
Oh, okay.
The one I've seen. It looks like a torpedo tube. It's just the width of my shoulders. Like
Oh,
that.
no, the walls are touching.
With plexiglass about yay thick. And there's a door on it. They close it and wrench it from the outside. And then they bring the pressure up. So it's an oxygen pressurization system. And that's how you cure, when you carbon monoxide, that's how you get rid of it. Am I doing this right? Okay, because he would know. So, yeah, because it attacks your red blood cells and it does not leave for, it's got a half-life. I mean, the half-life's not the right word, but is it? A very long time.
Very
Yeah.
I think I've already told you the story that I heard on one of the podcasts I listened to. There I Was by AOPA. It's incredible. About a guy in a Mooney who had carbon monoxide poisoning. And it really affected me because I get headaches real easy if I'm exposed to carbon monoxide. Otherwise, I don't get headaches, right? Or unless I drink coffee and then decide to quit. So this guy's saying, oh man, I did not have a carbon monoxide detector. I didn't need one. I know the effects of carbon monoxide. I only get headaches if I'm around carbon monoxide. So it's really easy to tell. I have nothing to worry about. And so it's a great story. And the guy, I mean, he survived because he's telling the whole story, but he had these headaches all day. Oh, it's just because I didn't have coffee. It's because I didn't have this, that. End of the story is he wakes up in flight, and he's like, wow, I fell asleep in the airplane. And his next thought is, God dang, my window is clean. I can really see the stars.
The window's not there.
And window wasn't there, and it was quiet. He was in the middle of a field.
Oh!
Yeah, he crash landed, and he had frostbite. So he had frostbite from being exposed, all this stuff. But so carbon monoxide. Funny thing is, right? You don't get carbon monoxide at a perfect mixture. So if you're running best power, it produces, what does it produce? It's water and carbon dioxide. Yeah. So anyway, you got to take, and the FAA is really hammering, if you're doing the wings program, or it's not wings for pilot or for mechanics, it's the AMT program, and watching the videos, which I highly recommend you do. They're just hammering this exhaust stuff, because man, every time you turn around, they're finding another way the exhaust systems kill you. So
We won't get carbon monoxide at lean peak because it's in excess of oxygen.
well, there you go. Another reason to fly the
Another
Lunar Peak.
reason.
Well, babe, I'm gonna have to get
That's a good
a
one.
IO 520 for my airplane.
Monoxide is a byproduct of a low amount of oxygen to fuel ratio. So if you have the excess of oxygen from the lean peak, you won't get carbon monoxide formation.
Makes sense.
There you go. See, colorless, odorless, makes it deadly.
It's literally an the combustion reaction.
Let me see. Deadly in concentrations of 4 parts in 10,000. What is that, parts per million?
You said 4 parts per 10,000?
4 parts per 10, is that 40?
0.0.
Anyway,
Maybe
I was
400, wouldn't
working on a plane and they stickered it. Something about, if the CO2 goes above, and it was some stupid, like 8, it's a really high number, land immediately. I'm like, or something. It was like, oh my God, that is so high. It's like, no. Okay, backfire, after fire. I know we talked about this. Backfire and after fires. Backfire is a fire going backwards. Backwards. See? Out the intake. And an after fire is a fire. What did I say? After the cylinder. Fire after the cylinder. In the exhaust. Which one's worse? I think after fire might be worse.
Really?
A lot of flight schools now have the new 172S models, which is fuel injected. So to start the fuel injected engine, you push the throttle in, some, mixture rich, fuel on, boost pump on, and it's a fuel injected system. So the fuel now runs through the fuel injection system. We'll do this in a week or two, and starts spraying into the cylinders. And then you get enough. When you decide you're done, you shut off the boost pump and hit the starter. Well, a lot of people, that fuel goes in the cylinder, goes right in through one of the valves, goes out the exhaust, and puddles up into the exhaust can. And so on any given day out at Executive, where they have dozens of these things, you hear the explosion every day. boom! Oh. And so what that does, there's an explosion inside of the exhaust, which is also the cabin heat, which means they now had an explosion in their cabin heater, which probably put a crack in it, and now they're going to go fly. Because nobody shuts down and says, well, we got to have an exhaust inspection. So,
Just cleans up the exhaust.
so at least with a backfire, it might blow out your air cleaner, but a new air cleaner for an airplane is like the cheapest thing there is. So, all right, let's see. 17. What the hell's 18? Oh, there we go. Jeez.
Knock your muffler off and get that horsepower.
That's right. More horsepower.
Yeah.
Not in California.
You didn't do it on purpose.
I swear, officer was just there.
Yeah. It was.
This seems like it's just right in the middle of nowhere. It makes no sense.
Like we're stressed.
Hey, which mixture burns the fastest? Or which burns fastest? Best power. Which burns the absolute slowest? Lean. Okay. A mixture just slightly richer, maybe 25 to 50 degrees rich of peak, than stoichiometric burns the fastest. Flame front slows down if the flame front is either richer or leaner. It slows down. We said that. That's why we use excessively rich mixture at high power settings. Why do we use an excessively rich mixture at high power settings? Prevent detonation. How does it prevent detonation? Well, I don't think the books say it, but one, we know that the fuel is 100, 130, so richer. Also, it's going to delay the peak power point to after top dead center to keep away from detonation. Let's see. And that's going to keep our CHGs down. Oh, I know what I'm talking about. After fires and backfires. That's why I have this here. Yeah, A, B, C. Oh, yeah. It's not likely that a mixture so lean or so rich that it will burn from 30 degrees before top dead center through power and most of exhaust to the point where the intake valve opens. So I'm talking about, I think I went into this, I copied and pasted or cut something. We know why we use excessively rich mixtures on takeoff, right? Delay the peak power point, keep out of the danger zone, cooler cylinder head temps, no detonation. Okay, talking about after fire and backfire. How do we get a backfire? Through the carburetor. Well, I think according to one of the Q&As, it's something about, it's a lean mixture that is, because you're running it so lean, it's going to blow back through the carburetor. Well, I promise you that you're going to hear all kinds of backfires and afterfires once you guys start running your carburetor on the ground power unit. It's going to pop and snort out the carburetor and the exhaust. So, let me see. So why do we get it out the carburetor? And there was we talked about the other day, there's a thought that, well, the flame front is burning so slow that it's still burning when the intake valve opens. Right? And we talked about this the other day. Well, let's talk about that. If the magneto is supposed to fire at roughly 25, 30 degrees before top dead center, right? 30 degrees on the small Continental. So 30 degrees before top dead center, boom, we light off the fuel mixture. So now we're saying, okay, the fuel's going to burn 30 degrees to top dead center. It's going to burn all the way down to the power stroke. And it's got to keep burning through the exhaust stroke. Never mind the fact the exhaust valve's open. And then it's going to come up, if we have valve overlap, it would still be burning right about here when the valve opens. Or if it's a Lycoming, it's going to go all the way to the top, come down, then the valve's going to open, then we get it fire. Yeah, it's pretty freaking slow. So I don't know about that. Not likely. However, during valve overlap, the manifold pressure is so low. Okay, valve overlap, exhaust is open, intake is open. Remember, Lycomings don't do that. We know that just because we've worked on them. But Continentals, if both valves are open and the manifold pressure is so low, it's a vacuum, where's it going to get its vacuum from? What's going to supply that vacuum need? We got two valves open. What kind of pressure do we have in the exhaust? Higher pressure? Intake low pressure? How hot's the exhaust?
Very.
1,000 degrees. So that coming across and up in can set off all the fuel that's waiting to come into the cylinders, which makes more sense. Let's see. Yeah, I like that.
That makes sense.
Let me see. After fire can be caused by a mixture that's too rich and you're dumping raw fuel into the, it's a pretty freaking rich mixture. You went through the combustion, it's still raw fuel in there. And so more often than not, I think it's too much prime. Let me see. Okay, we talked about that. All right. I think we're done with fuels and stuff. Talk about carburetors. Carburetors. I did talk about, because this is on here, but it's not on the test, about, we talked about low leads, valve recession, and stuff like that. So we'll talk about carburetors. There's 11 in there, point 11. What was my point 11? Just for those of you keeping track. Valve damage from loss of lead and fuels. We already covered that, so we're just going to move on to 12. Carburetors. Wow, I feel like that took me a long time. And I can change that to float carburetors because we're specifically talking about float carburetors. Float carburetors. Now I want a root beer float.
Ooh.
All right, function. Function of a carburetor.
Is that what you were talking about when I had mentioned floaters the other day?
When you had what?
When I had mentioned floaters the other day?
Floaters?
Yeah, you were like, floaters are something different.
You said you're talking about there's a different type of floaters in mine.
Oh, well, some people get floaters in their eyes.
Oh, the little stringy
yeah,
thing.
Or float in the toilet.
I didn't think so.
Well, now you will. Has something to do with fiber in your diet. I don't know which one it is. It's good. Ask the nurse over here. Is it good fiber or bad fiber? You can learn anything in this class. What'd you learn today in April in school? Well, I learned that I need more fiber.
Low on fiber.
All right, my first statement's a complete and total lie. A carburetor.
It's a lie.
Yes.
It only says-
Has
Oh, great.
only one. I copied this out of a book somewhere. Only one purpose.
Is it gonna
And
be
it has sounded great, except there's a problem with it. So, and that is, it's close. And that is to deliver a finely, so far it's correct, atomized fuel at the correct air-fuel ratio to the engine. And if I stop there, it'd be 100% accurate. Under all operating conditions.
So it's not a lie.
So that right there part's a lie. Why is it a lie? Well, for starters, they make a thing called a 150 aerobat. It's a Cessna 150 with a little bit stronger than your average Cessna 150, but it still has no 200 with a carburetor. And let me tell you something, they don't work upside down. So carburetors do not work upside down. So it can't be under all operating conditions. They'd have to be under all right side up conditions. But that's just fine because that same airplane, when it goes upside down, the oil pressure doesn't work either. So probably ought not to be running around. Mind you, any Cessna 150 can be an aerobat if you fly it wrong enough. I think most Cessna 150s are actually certified in the utility category because they're semi-aerobatic. Is yours?
Yeah, you can use spin.
Yeah.
Those are fun.
Let's see. All right, this is done by How are we doing? 1. This is done by 1. Or A. Measuring how much air is entering the engine What's the measuring device that measures how much air is going to the engine?
Venturi.
The Venturi. The more air that goes in there, the more suction you get. The more suction you get, the more fuel it's going to suck out. Sorry, I didn't mean to get all scientific and whatnot on you, but measuring the correct amount of fuel. For good combustion. For the measured air. How does it do that? Well, normally I wouldn't ask this, but you guys are watching the videos. I mean, you're so far ahead of me right now. So how does it deliver the correct amount of fuel? What things are in a carburetor that limit the fuel? What's that?
Jet.
The main metering jet. Main metering jet.
Yep.
And
Mixture control.
let's not bring the mixture control into it, because not necessarily.
Air metering force.
Okay, air metering force. Right? We're controlling the pressure of the air here versus the pressure of the air going to the Venturi. Well, mostly that's just Venturi. So we really haven't learned anything new. We just got main metering jet and Venturi, which we just talked about. What else could we have?
You're metering the seat and
What?
not the seat.
You're on the right track.
Yeah,
The float height, the height of the fuel in the flow bowl.
Which
The further down it is,
that
the
controls-
further away it is from the discharge nozzle, the more suction you need to get it out. The higher you go, the closer it is to the discharge nozzle, the easier it is going to be to leave. So those are two ways.
Idle circuit.
What's that?
Your idle circuit.
What about the idle circuit?
Well, it's measured fuel, but it's at idle, not.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the idle circuit, because Venturi doesn't work in the idle circuit. And then delivering and mixing the fuel into the air, moving into the air induction system. Oh, that just seems kind of like delivering and mixing the fuel air mix into induction system. Which is just to say, carburetor just shoots it off into the induction system. All right, there's different types of carburetors. We can define them by airflow type. Most carbureted cars have a downdraft, which means the air comes in the carburetor from the top, goes down into the engine. We don't do that. We have updrafts, which means it comes in, it goes up. Now the downside to that, if you ask me, is number one, the carburetor's down lower where it likes to pick up dirt. So that's not good. Number two, the fuel is, especially if you have an accelerator pump and you accelerate when the engine's not running, it squirts a jet of fuel that goes up and right back down. And you get a puddle of fuel inside of the airbox, and you get any sort of backfire, then you get a fire in the induction system. That's one of your test questions, not for me, but the FAA test. What happens if you get an induction fire? Keep cranking. Crank, crank, crank. If the engine starts, it'll suck the fire right in the engine, it's gone. But you want to make sure it's an induction fire. Because that's how I burnt the 310 pretty good. Trying to start it, and students are outside, oh my God, fire, fire. I'm like, well, induction fire, I'll just keep cranking. Well, what it was doing is it was running the fuel pump, and it was a fire after the engine, and so now the fuel pump kept running and feeding the fire. So, then put it out. And also side draft. Side draft is way more common in aircraft than you might realize. Lycoming uses a side draft HA6 carburetors on a lot of Lycomings. Just comes sideways instead of, it's just a single one though. We can talk about carburetors by operation. Operation. There's pretty much two that way. We have the float carburetor, which we're talking about now. Or we have the pressure carburetor, which we'll talk about in a week or so. Something like that. Yeah, next week. Okay.
Is that the, that's where we'd be using the pressure system on that stand you showed us, right?
If it works, but it doesn't, so you're not. All right, I kind of have a decision I have to make here with 12 pages of notes.
I can be done.
The decision is this, and every night I get to this point and I teach it different some years than I do in other years. Like one year I pretend like we're on a desert island and we created a carburetor from nothing. And we just kept building it and building it and building it until we got the whole system. Sometimes I can just do notes, which is boring. Sometimes I just bring up the carburetors on the chart. We just talk about every little thing as I go, which I'm kind of leaning towards that.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
But we have to cover 2 carburetors. Well, 3 basically. So
Yeah.
we can do that. So let me see. What do we got? You like that? Let's see. What do we got here? Carburetors. Oh yeah. Thought that was a video. Alright, I got a video of this running, but I don't think it's. Oh my goodness, there's so much to talk about. Okay.
Watch the video.